Good evening, everyone. It's Sunday, June 1st, 2025, 1 p.m. Central Standard Time here in Champaign, Illinois. You are watching Co-op for Two. You're joining me today for Game Design Diary Update number 9, where I'm going to talk about some of the progress that's been made on a game called New York Noir that I've been working on with help from the channel for the last 3 years or so. You're looking at the old box when the title was called High and Low. New box has been ordered, so we'll see what that looks like in a couple weeks or a month. Let me check in with the chat, see how everyone is doing. YouTube says 17 concurrent viewers. We've got a bunch of regulars here, but we've also got some new people that have been helping out, contributing some work to New York Noir, which I'm going to talk about today. Okay, let me show you my slide here and explain how this format works. I've got stuff to talk about. I'll probably go for an hour or a little bit longer today. I've got preset stuff I want to show you and talk about, but I am happy to answer questions and talk about any issues that the group wants to talk about related to the game. You should feel free to just write your questions in the chat. I won't get to them right away, but as I take breaks on my way through here, I'll stop and answer questions and we can talk. Here's a little outline of what I want to show you today. I want to start by talking about the most exciting development, which is a set of online tools that Peter has been working on for the last month or so. I can see Peter's in the chat. He can answer questions about that and talk about that. I want to talk a little bit about the new case that I've just finished writing called Foxtrot East. I want to talk about the new directory set changes and how that works. A bunch of new mechanics that I've been experimenting with lately. Talk about a new contact system like allies and business cards that Eric, who's in the channel, has been working on. Some new case log PDFs, some changes to that, lots of changes. I want to talk about a handbook I've been writing for authors who want to write cases. I want to make some book recommendations for those of you who are interested in writing cases for New York Noir or just writing mystery games in general. Then I'll talk a little bit about some conventions that I'm going to be at and then make my pitch for volunteers, etc. Okay, so quickly before we get started, this is the 9th design diary. I am not going to go through a big overview of the entire game. You can watch previous videos for that, but let me just remind you that New York Noir is a narrative mystery deduction game. I call it a board game, but it's just barely on the edge of board games, but it is directly inspired by Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, one of my favorite game systems. You can see a bunch of boxes behind me, games that were inspired, many of those games inspired by Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective and Gumshoe. And it's an attempt to iterate that system, and also create a sort of open source world for other authors to write games. You can see all the documents that exist in printed form for the game. We've got the telephone white pages. It's set in Manhattan, in New York City, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, etc. Here are yellow pages. Maybe 20% of the businesses are real businesses that were appropriate at the time, and the other 80% and all of the residents are fictionally generated with an attempt to make them period appropriate, ethnically representative of the neighborhoods. New York Noir is set in Manhattan, and Manhattan is a big, long, vertical strip of land not suitable for a single map, and so New York Noir divides Manhattan into neighborhoods. Each neighborhood has its own map. This is early work on the maps. Logan has been working on creating lots of art and everything, but very familiar to anyone who's comfortable with Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, very similar system. Then we have something slightly new that's not seen in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, a reverse directory, so that if you know a specific block where some business or person lives, you can use the reverse directory to see who else is on that block, who's on neighboring blocks, etc. Some recent work has gone into producing 2 new directories, a fingerprint directory that can be used to locate people if you find a fingerprint, to look it up and then see that subject's full set of prints, and then a criminal history directory that's got history of thousands of people where you could look up their demographics, notable characteristics, what kinds of crimes they've been arrested for, etc. And the idea is to try to see what kinds of cases we can build that make use of these things. And then I've got some bound versions of cases that have been written. These are 2 cases written by me, a demo case, short introductory demo case, and a much longer case that takes about 4 hours to play. Okay, so that's your little recap where we are. Now, let's get into the interesting new stuff. I'm going to start by showing you off the tools that Peter has been working on. Now, let me see if I can get this to properly switch over to a screen that we can see. Is this going to work? Yes. Okay. Well, let's give you a full screen view. All right. Now, I don't think I could properly convey how exciting this new development is. The printed directories that I just showed you are huge, and they're very expensive to print out. Let me see if I can reload this page if it shows bigger. There we go. Okay. All right, so directories are you can download right now everything I showed you, the maps, the directories, the yellow pages, white pages, in PDF form, but it's a little bit unwieldy to be juggling around these multiple documents. What Peter has been working on is a fully searchable map of the world that you can zoom in on, move around. So here is the map. Now, right now, there's no art for the buildings, but Logan has been sketching out and drawing hundreds of buildings that will be on this map at some point in the near future. Here's Central Park in Midtown. So what you're looking at here is a fully interactive map of Manhattan in the world of New York Noir. You can see neighborhoods are outlined by these dotted lines, and in fact, you could drop down and select a neighborhood like Greenwich Village here. And there you see, there's Greenwich Village outlined in red, and some locations that have been picked up and displayed. We've got the police department here. You can see when I select it, it shows it over here. There's the lead number, its street address and block. And you've got a couple options here for copying this information to the clipboard, bookmarking it, or setting it as an anchor. I'm going to talk about all this stuff a little bit. Let me go back out to Manhattan. Okay, so let me step back a little bit and tell you why these tools are so useful and the sort of two ways that, let's see, can I do it this way? Two ways that I imagine these tools are for, two ways that they're useful for. The first way, which is almost more important at this point, is as a tool for authors. And the shift in difficulty in writing a case and having these online tools versus having to use the paper tools is huge. There are going to be a lot of people that only want to play this game with the printed directories, and it's being designed so that to cater to those people who want to use printed materials. And I fall into that category. When I'm playing a game, I don't want to be using a screen and the internet. But when you're writing a case, the ability to move around here and search it while you're going, for example, let me just give you an example. I'm going to click on this block here, and we're going to see items on this block. Okay. Now imagine my case centers around this guy. Let's pick someone with a full name here. Colin Kirby, who lives here. Okay, so Colin Kirby lives at 56 West 50th Street. There's his lead number. Let's say he is going to be my suspect, or this is the scene of the crime. Okay, I could bookmark this. Let me show you the kind of thing that I like. I can make this an anchor. Okay, so now here's Colin, who I've made as my anchor. And now he's shown at the top. Now all these places are shown distance from him. So now let me go up here and look for subways that are near him. So here are the subways on the map. You can see how all of them. But now because I've set him as the anchor, now I've got them listed in order of distance. I can even show only those that are nearby his address. So now in my case, if I'm going to write and I want him to escape on a subway or something, you could imagine now I know these are the subways that I would want to write entries for, these close subways to him. Maybe he went in, maybe he works at a bakery. Okay. So let's just say distance from anchor. Okay, so here's Magic Muffins. That's going to be the Studebaker Corporation. Magic Muffins is where? It's maybe a little hard to see on my map. So this is where I might make him work. Oh, that's not Magic Muffins. That's a different one. Is this? Where is Magic? Oh, it's right nearby. Okay, so now the ability to search for this bakery near this guy, or let's say in my case, I want him to go stay at a hotel. I can search for hotels now and look for the closest hotel to him. Here it is, right on this block right here. So this ability to do searching and then to put this in a case, I can just click this button here and it copies this information along with the lead in a format suitable for my tools that let you build cases. Means it is super easy. It makes it much quicker to be writing cases and to search for things and find locations that are suitable for a case. Now, Peter has written all kinds of crazy advanced searches here, and let's see if I've got some of them. Oh, I think actually they're just open on the website. Let's try this. Okay, so here are some of the kinds of things you could search for as an author. Remember, these are only searches you would do as an author, but here's a good example. A drugstore near one of your bookmarks. You can bookmark all the places that are interesting in the case. Here's an example of finding places on a certain street. So if I go here, let's see if this works. Okay, so here are places on places and people on 42nd Street or 2nd Avenue. So maybe you want to make a case that's all about someone running down, maybe your suspect is running down Broadway and hitting places as he goes. Then here's a great example of the kinds of things you can do. So there's all kinds of advanced searches that Peter has made for finding places near certain places, places named certain things of certain types. Here's a person that's not in an apartment, that lives near a warehouse and near a pharmacy. So if you've got a specific case idea in mind, you can do all kinds of fancy searching. For me, really, most of the time that I'm using the tool, what I'm doing is just clicking on a block and seeing who lives on the block. Just the ability to quickly do this without having to pull out the reverse directory or find what's the nearest subway. So here's another neat little thing to show you. The people, the residents here are shown in these red dots. Again, you click on them, you see them highlighted, who this person is, Pearl Frechette. These are businesses. What these little purple dots here are apartment tenants. So if I click on the building, the Windermere, you can see here are all the tenants in the Windermere. They're shown in purple here. So again, this is stuff you could find using the printed directories or the PDFs, but it's just so much easier finding it this way. So here you can see I can click on the different residents of this building, and maybe you want to write a case about Jean O'Leary, and as part of your idea for your case, you're going to maybe look for other people named O'Leary. Are there other people that might have their name confused with her? So here you go. There's Claire, Garvin, and there's our Jean. And you could bookmark these so that you remember where they are, because maybe your killer is killing everyone named O'Leary. All right, so there's the basics of the very basics of this map tool that Peter has written, which I cannot tell you how huge a thing it is for writing cases, that be able to just keep on this screen. I'm just blown away by this. Now, a natural second thing to, and if you're using a tablet, you can pinch to zoom in and pan and all that. Now, a natural, well, let me take a break here and check in with the chat for a second. Did you make up these? Oh, let me scroll up. Time period, yeah, 1920s, 1950s. You could make a case in the current time as well, or go further back, but the maps and the yellow pages are sort of targeted in that range. But you could set it wherever you want. You can set it, you don't have to, you use it however you want. If you want to make a supernatural case, go for it. Did you make up the names? Well, okay, so all of the data here, the map data is taken from New York City open source GIS data, but all of the residents And most of the buildings are all generated in code programmatically, and a huge amount of work has gone into sort of crafting the distribution of businesses and of people. So one of the main ideas of New York Noir is to make each neighborhood have a personality. And so there's sort of exaggerated ethnic breakdowns. So for example, if we look at Chinatown, which is here, and we look at the residents in Chinatown, what you'll see is they tend to be Asian names. Not all. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into creating names. There's an effort to make people live with certain probability near the businesses they work at, to have different population densities in different neighborhoods, to use different ethnic last names and hyphenated names occasionally. So if you go just next door to Little Italy, you'll start to see lots of Italian names and businesses. You'll get business names that are from families quite often. So lots of work has gone into, so if you see a business name like Marcello and Sunflowers, which is here, probably if we search for Marcello, let me see, let's bookmark Marcello and Sunflowers. Probably if we search for Marcello, we will find here that Marcello lives nearby. So Damiano Marcello lives nearby his shop here. It's not always the case. Sometimes, more often, they'll live in the neighborhood, but not on the same block. And then with some other probability, they'll live further apart. So huge amount of effort has been made into trying to make each neighborhood like a small town. This was one of my ideas, to not make it so overwhelming and not make it feel also samey. It's a much bigger world than Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, but my idea is that each case will probably be set in one or two neighborhoods, and so how can we make each neighborhood feel like it has a personality of its own? Part of that is done by the ethnic distributions and the population density, but the other thing is each neighborhood has a little page talking about its history and its various details. Some are crime-infested, rundown tenements, and some are where the richest of the rich in America live. So there's that. There's also, each neighborhood is set up so that it tries to have a distribution of things in it. So each neighborhood has some restaurants, some bars, there's certain things that are in every restaurant, and then certain neighborhoods specialize in certain areas. Like if you go down to the financial district or the civic center, you'll see many more governmental buildings and stuff, and lawyers, etc. Okay, now I'm not done with the map tools yet. Not done with the stuff Peter has done, which has just completely blown me away. So I've talked about these tools being largely useful to authors. And you can see there are searches you can do here that you absolutely could not do using the books as a player. So if you were a player and you were trying to hunt your killer, you couldn't say, okay, show me all the bakeries near this guy, where this guy lives. You'd have to do a little bit more work on it. So what I haven't talked about for these, let me just turn on the a little bit. What I haven't talked about here is the interface that Peter has been working on for players. So let me just show you a couple things. Now, this is the part where I've been trying to convince Peter to make some changes, to do some work that I'd love to see. For me, this single page is the joy of it. See, being able to see places on the map. But you could see right now, if I wanted to, first of all, in the real directory, if you were playing, you couldn't search for someone's first name. You can't say, give me all the people whose first name is John. Here you type John, you get first names and last names. If we search in all of Manhattan, you see we're going to get a lot of them. But you're going to get first names, John's, last name, John's, businesses with John in them. This is not something you could do as a player. So there's ability to do some searches on this page that you don't want to let players be able to do. But the ability to move around this map and the ability to say who lives here is something that players should be able to do. This is basically visually doing what a reverse directory does. But you can see Peter has up here separate entries for the white pages and the yellow pages. So here, if you wanted to search for John, what you would get is only businesses that start with the word John, or people whose last name is John or Johnson, etc. So the white pages entry is the online search equivalent of the printed white pages or the PDF of white pages. Now, it's not that hard to use the PDF if you're just doing this kind of thing, but you can see here's that, and you could jump to that person, John & Co. Hairdressers, in a map by clicking this button here. And here is that thing. But you can see what I've been begging Peter, what I've been fighting with Peter is it's not really designed for that. What you can't see is every time I click on something in the white pages, it opens up a new map. Here, for example, you can see a new page opens up with a new map. So it's not really designed to be integrated with this map page. And yellow pages is an equivalent search of the yellow pages. Here's what you would get out if you opened up the printed yellow pages. You've got categories. That's what the yellow page is all about. If I click music stores, here I get a listing of music stores in the yellow pages. So this is just a complete representation of what you would get in the yellow pages. So this white pages and yellow pages are online equivalents of the PDFs. It's not that hard. It's not that inconvenient to use the PDFs for that, but this is pretty nice. And especially if you can jump to it in the map. This is one of the things that's unpleasant with having a yellow pages, a map directory, a reverse directory, is if you want to cross-reference stuff, you got to have all of these directories open on your table and searching through them. Whereas now, if I want to find where Baldwin Pianos is, I can just click here and it opens up a map and shows me where it is. And then I could click here and see what's next door. What's on the same block as Baldwin Pianos. That would take you a minute to go get out the reverse directory and search through it. So it's very useful. Now, what I'm trying to get to convince Peter to do, and I hope you guys can help me, what I really want is I want this map-centric interface, which is so enjoyable to use. I would love to see the white pages and yellow pages as part of this sidebar integrated as one system. So I never have to leave this page and it never opens up multiple maps every time I want to find something. What I really want to be able to do is have this page and click here and say, I want to look at the white pages. I want to search through the white pages. I want to search through the yellow pages. I want to do this advanced search and disable the advanced search for players unless they say they want to cheat. And then I could just search for a person and then click around him and always be able to see where it is on the map, always keep my persistent bookmarks. So I hope you guys will help me convince Peter to make an all-in-one search page. And the other thing I think would be nice, I think one of the things that Peter is saying is like, well, if you're on the yellow pages, this lets you use the full page to view the yellow pages with the ads. But you can see these are giant ads. You really don't need this page to be so wide. And what I'd love to see is just all of that integrated here. And my request is to have a little divider that you could shift around. So if you're searching white pages and yellow pages, maybe you don't need a big map, you just need a small map, and most of the page can be used for this. But honestly, the ability, even when you don't normally care, normally when you're playing New York Noir and searching the yellow pages or the white pages, you're normally not paying that much attention to where it is on the map. And that's a shame, but it's just not practical. It's sort of a cognitive overload to always be paying attention to where something is. But you'd love that, be able to have some spatial reference. So that's the other thing I'm trying to convince Peter, that even when you're doing a white pages or yellow pages search, the ability to have the system showing you where it is on the map. So if I search for a pet store, just knowing that Adopt a Cat is here on the Upper West Side, it makes it easier for me to keep it in mind and easier for me to bookmark it and say, okay, I'm going to have to be coming back to this. So I would just really love to be able to convince Peter. He's done amazing work, but to be able to convince him to make an all-in-one page here. All right, now the other thing I want to show you two more things here. First of all, I want to show you that after Peter got done making this for New York Noir, he realized how general purpose some of these features are. And he made a version for Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. So here's the online map you're familiar with, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. If I click, I can see the directory places that are in that location and do all the normal bookmarking, searching. Okay, so there's 221B Baker Street, where Sherlock Holmes is. There's Mycroft at the Diogenes Club. And here's Basil Holmes. I'm not sure we've ever visited Mrs. Basil Holmes. Okay, but pretty amazing. And here's a version, if that wasn't good enough, here's a version for Mythos Tales, one of the other Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective spin-offs. Again, same thing. You could search for warehouses. Click, see what else is in these locations. Not many places in Mythos Tales, and these haven't been rigorously checked, but pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Now, as if this wasn't good enough, now here, this is the double-edged sword, this last part I'm going to show you, because Peter has gotten obsessed with this latest feature, and it's getting in the way of him creating the things that I want him to do. But I'm going to show you, because I do think in the future this is going to be very useful. So let me show you something else, Peter, is that if you click on this play button, what you see is some actual games. So here are the first two cases I've written. The Passage of Crooked game is the tutorial. Now, if we click on this, what you'll see is a new page here. And what you're looking at here is Peter's implementation of a way to play the game completely online. Here is the case. Here is my case, the first introductory pages of it. Not the whole document, but the first introduction. And you can see that it's the normal stuff, white pages, yellow pages, map. But it's also got a place for you to keep notes as you play. There's the casebook tab. It's also tracks your history of where you go, what you visit. It's got some settings so you can save and load the game. So for example, if we were playing this case, now I don't remember how fully that Peter has implemented everything. Remember, this tool was not my tool that produces this PDF is designed currently for printing out. It's not really designed for online play. That's going to come later. That's a whole other discussion. But you can see that Peter is actually parsing the PDF and displaying only certain pages. You can see that game he's picked up from the PDF that these markers are required. He's picked up that this introduction has given you access to this document, these two documents. If I click and go to a place, here it is, it's gone to it. So it's basically an online playable version of the PDF that's also tracking history. You can see I visited these leads, I read these documents. Here's my history. I could jump back to them. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary. It's keeping track of recent searches. Okay, and then as you're playing, if you take a note, it'll remember what lead you were reading when you took that notes. Is that right? Let me just see here. If I go to history and I go to this entry, close this. I guess if I leave a note, I forget. If I leave a note, I can't remember. I guess these notes are general, but you can, I forget how you leave a note about the lead you're viewing. If I highlight text, okay. So here we go. Let's see. If I wanted to highlight, call the operator. Now, what do I do here? Do I go to notes here? No. There's some way to make a note relevant to the page you're on. Okay, let me talk about this a little bit. Right click, says Peter. So if I highlighted this and then I right click, I can add a note here. Okay, so I've added a note. Let's come back, or there is a typo. Okay, so now anytime I come back here, let's see, say I'm reading document 1, then I come back in my history to start. Now I come back to this location. You can see there's my note. It's persistent. And if I go to my notes, you can see here is my general notes, but here's a note that's been associated with this location. All right, so let me talk about this for a little bit. From my standpoint, this is really meant to be played. This is a game that appeals to people who like playing on paper. So my focus is on providing a printable final version that people can work with the printed directories. But there are two spin-off issues that are independent of that. The first one is playtesting. It is very hard to playtest these kinds of cases. It's one of the real problems it's a real impediments to people who want to write cases. It's how hard it is to playtest. People can only playtest it once. There's a limited number of people that like these kinds of games. And if you're rapidly changing and modifying a case, then how do you put this in the hands of a playtester? Do they have to print it out? Are they going to read it from a screen? And then how do they provide feedback? So you could imagine, even if the final cases were never meant to be played online, the ability to have early playtesters just hop on a web page, play a case, and be able to leave feedback as they're playing the case is huge. It makes it much easier for people to playtest cases and provide feedback. In addition, it offers the possibility that an author can see exactly where the playtesters tried to go, that there were no entries. That's a huge part of playtesting and writing these cases, is trying to anticipate all the places people might think to try to go. Maybe you don't anticipate that they heard someone was a baker, so they were going to go to a nearby bakery. So the ability of having an online playtesting tool that can track where players wanted to go and give that kind of feedback is huge. And then the third little independent thing is that the goal of this system is eventually to support play-by-mail. And for play-by-mail support, there's a sort of hybrid kind of interaction that has to be done with players, and a sort of process where it's not a single printed book, but where players make moves and then the back end keeps track of the state of their game and sends them off a couple page entries. So in my opinion, all of this is important. We do want an online playtesting functionality, and we need more interactive stuff. It's just Peter sort of jumped the gun. He's done such amazing work that he's working around all the limitations of the PDF format to create this online playable thing. So the only thing I've been trying to convince Peter to do is just slow down on the online play features so that my back-end software tools can produce the data for him in a much more friendly form, so he doesn't have to kludge and hack around the PDFs. But I think this is clearly the way we're going. It's a print-focused game, but the online support tools are going to be there both for authors and for playtesters and for the play-by-mail stuff. All right, amazing. And as I said, soon we'll have Logan's art all in these maps. Pretty amazing. All right, let's see. I can see this session is going to go long. I'm predicting now a 2-hour session. Okay, so I hope you will all help me convince Peter to make a single page stuff. Okay, Martinez Conradi is here. He is the author of a whole bunch of Sherlock Holmes consulting detective fan cases, some of my favorites, and he has said, hey, could you go to the Battered Bookworm? I just want to see what it looks like, since that's a case that Martinez sent to me to test my back-end PDF generation tools. So yes, let's go to Battered Bookworm. Now, Martinez, Battered Bookworm that you sent me was not as nicely formatted as the one I've just discovered on Board Game Geek. So that still needs a little bit more work, but let's go to, let me close these pages here. Okay, let's go to Battered Bookworm. Okay, so this is a case that Martinez Conradi wrote for Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective that was converted into my casebook tools. That's what's laid out, this version of it in PDF. And let's see, if you were playing it, we've got a crumpled receipt from this location and a burned note. I'm not sure you're supposed to have gotten this note, but let's see. So if we wanted to play this, let's see if we can actually do it. If I search for Boland, here's Denny Boland. I don't know if he's in the case. Okay, so this is the button that would bring us to this lead if it existed. Yes, okay, here. 16 Northwest, the home of Mr. Denny Boland, is considerably less organized than his bookstore. We find more evidence of his love of smoking. Unfortunately, our search fails to uncover new points of interest. Okay, Denny Boland. And then if we went to the map here, we should be able to search for Boland. And he should be in 16 Northwest, and there he is in 16 Northwest. Now, if you're curious, for example, here's the battered bookworm. If we go, just as a little diversion, if we go to the New York Noir website, this is my software tools, and I'm logged in as administrator. So here are some of the cases that's here. And if we look at the battered bookworm, here it is. You can see this is the software site that I've designed for using this language I've made called Casebook to format cases. So you could see here is the printed PDF of this case with its table of contents, optional, of course. There's the introduction you saw. This is the PDF that Peter is taking the online play stuff for, but made to be printed. You could see there's the lead we just went to, 16 Northwest. Don't look at all these spoilers if you don't want to be spoiled. But you could also go and take a look at, if I click here, we'll see all the images, previous versions. But if you're interested in the source code for making a Sherlock Holmes consulting detective case, here's what it looks like. Don't be intimidated by that stuff at the top. Here's mostly what it is. It's mostly marked down with some annotations. There's a formatting for newspapers. And then here are the main leads. So if you're interested in writing a Sherlock Holmes consulting detective case or a New York Noir case or a case for Bureau of Investigation or a case for Mythos Tales, there's support for all of that. All right. Let's check in with the chat and see how we're doing. All right. Now, what's next on my... Whoops. That's not what I wanted to show. All right, got a lot of stuff to show you. So I think this is going to be a double length update, but that's okay. You don't have to watch the whole thing. You could jump around later. All right, so I want to go back to my slides. Let's see if I could do that. Okay, we're using a laptop. We're using a tablet. Okay, we went over Peter's online tools. That's the most important thing for today's session, the most mind-blowing stuff. I just cannot describe how much more enjoyable it is to write a case using Peter's tools than having to write a case using the printed stuff. It's just huge. You could search for, if you have some idea for a name or a person, it's the difference between taking a second to search for it and spending 30 seconds searching for it. Okay. That's definitely not what I wanted to do. I've got two little foot controls here. Okay. what's next? The other things here will go a little bit faster. All right, let me talk about my new case, Foxtrot East. I've just finished it. Debbie Levy, who's in the chat, has done her editing on it. And have I downloaded it to bring it up? Let me see if it's here. Okay. So here is Foxtrot East, my new case. Now, it'll be available for playtesting this week using Peter's tools. You could do online searching and stuff. I don't think you should play it with that play interface, but you could use the white pages and yellow pages. It does use a new directory, which I'll talk about in a minute. But what I do want to talk about is the length of this case. So the wrong book, which was I've written 3 cases now. A tutorial case called The Past is a Crooked Game that teach you the mechanics. That you could probably play it an hour or so, maybe 2 hours. The wrong book seemed to be taking people maybe 5 hours to play. Foxtrot East is about double the size. So I suspect, and it's got some other things that'll slow you down. So I suspect that we're talking about an 8-hour playthrough that you're not going to want to do in one session, maybe closer to the size of a standalone Sherlock Holmes consulting detective game like Adventures by Gaslight or Queen's Park. Let me just show you the table of contents. Okay, here's page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. Okay, so you could see in the front page, it's got 18 documents, 350 leads. It's broken up into 7 days, really closer to, I think, probably 5 days, but 5 days with 5 different newspapers. Debbie says she'd rate it a 5 of 5 difficulty. I'm not so sure. But but you shouldn't start with this case. But I'm very curious to hear what people think of it, especially if you've played the wrong book. So I do think you should play in that order. Like play the first demo case, The Past is a Crooked Game, then play the wrong book, and then play this one. But there's lots of new stuff, new mechanics here. This uses the fingerprint directory. This uses some other new mechanics that I'm going to talk about today. But it also does some different stuff with the ending. And I'm really curious. I think it's going to be a divisive case. I think that some people are not going to like it. And some people may like it more than the others. I'm very curious, though. You could go to the first page and just take a look at the intro here. So new instructions, new case logs. I'm going to go through those in a minute later. New contact list. I'm going to talk about this. Okay, here's our little introduction. You basically got a dead body on a bus. That might be more than it appears. Set in 1941, you're still a cop in this one. In the wrong book, we're flashed forward a bit, and you're a private eye. This is when you were still a cop. I've got a whole career trajectory for the protagonist, but okay. So I really do want some playtesters for this, but I'm hoping that I'm really interested in playtesters who have already played the wrong book, because I really want to hear how you compare the two. All right, let me go back now to our slides here. Okay, this is working reasonably well. I was wondering, is there a way to play this on the channel with just me sort of reading the introduction and letting people choose where to go? Or I was also thinking about, I'm such a fan of these delayed forced slow play games. So another idea I had is to release this, just release day 1 and then like the next week release day 2 and force people to play it over the course of a couple weeks. But maybe we'll think about that a little bit more. Okay, very excited to have finished that game, that new case, and excited to have a big long case. Not everyone likes the long cases, but I do. Okay, next up, the new directory set. So I feel bad for anyone who's printed out the version 2 directories, but it's just the nature of this project that we're refining the directories over time. Eventually, they'll be locked in. When we eventually do print and produce New York Noir in a printed form, we've got to be sure of the directories. So we were with version 2 for a while. We're migrating to version 3. Part of the job of my software tools that produce the PDFs is to capture all locations and places that are used in previous cases and make sure that they exist unchanged in the new directories. But I had a bunch of help from Nicola working on improving the ethnic name. So if you're working with the old cases, if you play tested the previous cases, you've been using directory set 2. Now we're moved to directory set 3. So in addition to bug fixes in the names of places and other kinds of issues and tweaking the number and locations of places, version 3 adds a couple of really important things. And that's these 3 items here: canvassing, these abandoned, vacant, condemned warehouses, and generic office space. So I want to talk about what those are. And I can show you. Okay, well, the first piece, canvassing, what's the best way to show you this? If I open up the new yellow pages, okay. All right, I'll save canvassing for a moment. Let me just show you from the yellow pages one thing that's new. All right, so here are the yellow pages. You know the new, if you've been working with version 2, you don't have links in the table of contents. Now you do have page numbers and links. What you'll notice, in addition to some fixes in version 2, is a couple new categories. And the first one here is this vacant property category. And the other one is office space. So if I go to office commercial space, I'm just going to click on that here if I can. Office commercial space. Okay. So what we've done here is add a whole bunch of places. I don't know, maybe 100, maybe 60, that are sort of generic office buildings where any company could be located. So if you remember, the odd thing about the yellow pages is this is sort of a fixed world. Once it gets done, once the directories are done, if you wanted to add a business, if you wanted to add another pet store that wasn't in the pet stores, you'd have to sort of explain to the person, you'd have to tell them, here's the lead number to go to. And it's a little awkward. So what I've tried to do here is create some more generic places that you could put new businesses and stuff in without having to explain why it's not in the directory, etc. So we basically just got a whole bunch of generic office buildings where you could situate any business. I don't know why there are nightclubs here. Did I turn the page? Yes. Okay. So you could just put any new business that you wanted in one of these office buildings. Now, more interesting, though, is the... how am I going to... Okay, good. Okay, more interesting is the vacant land, which is similar. But what you'll see is if I click on vacant property, what we've got now is several pages of abandoned properties, condemned buildings, empty warehouses, structures under construction, and vacant lots. So these are sprinkled all throughout the maps of the neighborhoods. So if you ever need to use a hideout, a building, something, you've got them sprinkled all over the map. And I think these are all sort of tools. We're going to see what people make of these, how people use them. And of course, this is a phone book. Phone books have errors. So if you wanted to add a place that wasn't in the directory, you would just explain that somewhere. But at least now we have structures sprinkled all over the map where bad things could happen. Or things could happen in some unlisted location. Okay, and then canvassing is an important feature, and I make use of it in Foxtrot East, my new case. And what's the best way? The easiest way is to probably show you with Peter's map. So let me switch back to that, if I can. All right, so canvassing. This is something that would be in the reverse directory. Maybe the reverse directory already has it. Does it? I don't think it does. No. Okay, every single block in the world now has a canvas action. And it's this little center icon here, canvas around area. So any block, every block has a canvas action. And the idea thematically of the canvas action is, if you play Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, you know each block just has the neighborhood number, like 48, and you would just look up 48 and you would read if there's any clue relating to any of these places. And that's something I wanted to avoid in New York Noir, because that gives away by accident things, it aliases things. Suppose you had a crime here. Oops. Oh, how that happened. Suppose we had a, what did I do? A bookmark? Okay, I can't get rid of it. Anyway, suppose we had a crime here. In Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, you would just be like, okay, let me just go to this 12 and I'll see if anyone saw anything. Maybe I get lucky, maybe I don't, whatever. In New York Noir, it's much more fine-grained. You're not going to stumble on clues by accident. But you could imagine that if you had a crime that happened in the street here, let's say your crime scene happened in the street, you could imagine, well, how would players look about finding witnesses and talking to them? Well, they could go on this block and they could say, which place here is likely to have seen something? Well, maybe the FDNY people, maybe the social club over here was open. Maybe they saw something, so I'll knock on their door. Or maybe there's someone who lives here directly across the street. Maybe this person saw something. But now there's this other mechanic that the author can use as they desire, and that's the canvassing. And thematically, the canvassing is something that would take a little bit of time, but it's basically like walk around the block, look for stuff. Look for witnesses, look for stuff that might have been dropped on the ground, etc. It's sort of a step between Sherlock Holmes and New York Noir. Before you have some very specific place you want to go, it might be that there's some benefit from taking a long walk around the block. That's basically what it represents, canvassing the area around some location. Most of the time, that's probably not going to get you anything. Sometimes an author might use it to say, like, for example, in this case, let's say there was the murder that happened. Let's say we said there was a murder that happened here. And maybe the way that the author has written the case is that on this adjacent block right across the street, this person might have seen something from their window. right? Or here's the social club might have seen something. And the idea is you don't want the player to have to go to all 20 of these places to find the one that's got information. So as an author, what you might do for the canvassing is to be like, I walk around the block and I see there's one apartment building with a perfect view. And I can see, there's a whole bunch of people outside the Raven Knights Social Club. That would be sort of like a little bit of a nudge about where the player could focus their efforts so they're not just shooting in the dark visiting all these places. And the rules have been changed to say if you do a canvas action, even if there's no entry, it still costs you an hour of time. So everything else in the game, if you go and you look up and there's no lead there, then it doesn't cost you any time. Canvassing is meant to be like something that you shouldn't be doing every moment of every day. You shouldn't be canvassing every block. But if you have a good reason to do it, then there's going to be an entry for it. And if you play Foxtrot East, you'll see canvassing gets used. Okay, so that's the new directories and the new features. I do like how the switching is working. Okay. All right, maybe we'll pick it up a little bit here. New mechanics and ideas. Okay, so I have a bunch of stuff to show you here. This is probably the bulk of the rest of the talk today. New case logs. Okay, let me show you the new case logs. I don't think I have a copy of the old case logs, but there's been some shift here for the better, I think, of tracking. So in the past, we had sort of a double page sheet that was for tracking markers and documents and demerits, and culture, and then one for tracking the leads. And now those have been sort of structured, reorganized a little bit. Do I not have a... Let me see if I don't have... I guess I don't have it. Somewhere I have an old copy. All right, let's not worry about it. All right, so we've decided you shouldn't have notes for where you find markers, which gives me more room. And this is trying to be a generic tracking sheet that you could see could handle some fairly big cases. So up to 40 documents. Here's where the game is going to tell you when you get access to a document to circle it, or you get access to a certain marker. Here we've got room for almost 60 markers. In my case, you could see I got about 40 markers, 38 markers in my case. So it could happen. We've adopted John Keene's new system where there are some instructions in the book that could sometimes tell you to underline a marker or circle it or cross it out. Here's a little place just to record how long it's taken you to play and when you played it. Here's the name of the case. Then we've got these check boxes for demerits. That's almost always happens when you take a hint. It's a whole built-in hint system into New York Noir. It's one of the ways to avoid people getting stuck and having a bad time, but you do pay a price in demerits. And then culture is another tracking of when you visit places that are sort of true history. Maybe you meet someone famous or you go to a famous place, you might be told to click culture. And then there's a couple of things here that are designed for people to make use of in cases however they see fit. And the idea for tracks came from War Story. Has certain tracks, and you can watch my review of War Story for how clever it is. There's a built-in track for IRP. I'm going to show you what that means in a second. But there is a new set of common checkboxes that you'll now see in Foxtrot East and in other cases called reputation. It's sort of the other side of the coin for demerits. You get demerits mainly when you take hints or mess up, and you get reputation as sort of a bonus when you do something well. So this is the sheet you would have in front of you to track mostly markers, required markers, which play a bigger role in New York Noir than they do in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Here is the new sheet for tracking your visits. As you visit a lead, what time, where you visit, whether maybe you want to write down the neighborhood as well, any notes, and then a little column for you to keep track of whether you should come back. Frequently, you'll go to a lead and it'll say, come back at 4 p.m., or it'll say, come back when you have this marker. So this is a nice little way for you to just put a little check to remind you to come back. You're supposed to use one of these for each day of your case. If you have a 3-day case, you'd be using 3 sheets. And here's a place for you to record. This is day 1. It's Monday, and it's January 1st. And here's where you keep track, like your day started at 10 a.m. You went to lead 4:23:22, and here's what you saw, and you would keep track of that. There is now, though, a new section called scheduled events. And that's been a fairly major change to how days are structured. And I'm going to explain that as I show you. I'll compare an old versus new. But the other thing I wanted to show you here is the campaign log sheet. So one of the ideas for New York Noir is to encourage more support of connected campaigns. So here is just a little log for you to keep track of what case, when you played it, and what your score, demerits, reputation, culture is. So, for example, my cases are meant to be played in a campaign of 10 to 12 connected cases. And as you're playing cases, they're mostly self-contained, but at the end of a case, you'll be told, based on what you did, to update various tracks based on decisions you made or things you did. So over the course of 10 cases, you'll be doing like a +1, +1, +1 here. Maybe you made a choice. Maybe you spent time with Jules, so you got a +1 here. So by the time you finish your campaign, you'll have a whole bunch of tracks here, like you have a 2, a 3, a 4, a 0, 0, 6, whatever. And then there's space for a case telling you to write in certain tags and markers and keep track. And I've written a whole document about how I think authors should use the campaign log sheet and how to think about writing a campaign. But the basic idea is decisions you make in one case could affect branches in a second case, in a future case, but also by the time players finish playing a campaign, this is like a little profile. One of my ideas here is that it's fun to sort of build a character. And that when players finish playing a game of New York Noir in a campaign, each case they'll have made decisions. They'll have made decisions that are a little bit choose your own adventure decisions, but they'll also have different play styles. Some players might take a lot of hints. Some players might spend all the time going to all the culturally interesting places. Some players might rush ahead and just do the bare basics, etc. And then you've got all your decisions. So part of my idea is that one of the fun elements of New York Noir is seeing how you play differently than other players. And by the time you finish a campaign, you'll have played very differently than other players. And we can use this to sort of assign you a personality type. So are you sort of the aggressive player, the efficient player, the meticulous player? And we'll be able to give you a little personality. Basically, it's like you're taking a personality quiz as you play through a campaign. Might lead to different romantic interludes based on who you try to build relationships with. And then also included here is a little feedback form that can be included in cases. The whole idea here is to give authors toolkit for writing their cases. And you'll see if you play Foxtrot East that these are all included using the casebook tool that builds the PDF. You can say, okay, there's 3 days of the case, so there should be 3 logs, and this gets put at the end. So all of these things are actually embedded inside the download of the case. Okay, there's the new case logs. Let me check in with the chat, see if there's anything else for us to discuss. Martinez says it would be nice to watch a live playthrough of Foxtrot East. It might be much to digest for a new author attempting to write a case. Well, that's partly why the tutorial case was written, both for players, but also an author can look at the tutorial case and see how to write a case. But a playthrough of the tutorial case on stream would be a nice idea. I think that's a good point. But that is a good segue for me to show this off. Maybe we'll consider this a little interlude before I get back to new mechanics. So as I've been writing my third case, I've been preparing this little document. It's not so little anymore, on how to write a good case. This is not a technical document on using the tools. I have recorded a tutorial or two on using my tools, and I'll write a separate document on how to use the casebook language to write case. But this is more like how to actually write the story. And I get questions from people saying, like, how long should it be? How many clues? How many plots? How do I go about writing a case? So I've tried to take the lessons that I've learned while writing cases and from some of these books and write them out here. So here's my biggest epiphany is how valuable it is to have a first draft of scenes, and then you can fix everything. So it's a little bit my philosophy for writing a case, and there's a little bit of redundancy here, but you can see these are my guidelines for how you write a case. So if you're interested in writing a case for New York Noir or Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, you might take a look at this document. There's a link to it on the Board Game Geek page, how to think about final questions, how to write an epilogue. Some of these things are New York Noir sort of specific, about required markers, adding choices at night, side cases, talk a little bit about why side cases are important, how to write them, different patterns of clues that are most satisfying, the question list, open-ended questions, which were sort of stolen idea from John Keene, or primary, secondary questions, and then some tips that I think are important for making a good case. And controlling difficulty and things that make a case compelling. These are just, some of these are general ideas. Some of these you might not find useful. Some of these are subjective. How long should it be? Opening scene, humor, bad ways to add difficulty that you want to avoid, writing newspapers, required markers, general tips for writing scenes, some recommended books, which I'm going to show you later today, then some notes on play testing and editing, some notes on writing good hints, some notes on creating a sense of time and place, various tips on writing dialogue, storytelling, a little checklist for you to go through and see, have I done this? Have I done this? Do I need to add this? Okay, work in progress, but you can find this on the Board Game Geek Guild, not the Board Game Geek, the Board Game page for New York Noir has a link to this and all other documents. But if you're interested in writing a case, nothing would be better than to have more people writing cases. So if you feel like it, jump right in. You can use that. You can just, experiment with whatever you want. But if you're looking for some guidance, that might be a document you want to take a look at. Okay, back to new mechanics. Okay, so I showed you the new case log that has a section for scheduled events. And now I want to show you what that change looks like. I don't want Foxtrot East. Is it here? Where have I put? I thought that okay, there's the old one. And give me a second here. Okay, here's the new one. Okay, so if we look at the demo, I think this is the original demo. Okay, this is the original demo case. And what I want to show you is the day one discussion of required markers. No, that's not right. There's the old case. Okay, here's the old case. All right, so I just recently reconverted. Okay, you can see here was the old case log and the old tracking thing. All right, so let me just show you. Here's the important part. Okay, so here is what we used to do. There's a very important concept in New York Noir called required markers. And it's designed to keep people from playing through the game and missing key pieces of evidence that they would need to see in order to solve the case, but still keep control of difficulty. So I've talked at length about one of the problems with Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective is nothing makes sure that you haven't missed something critical. And because New York Noir is focused on having multiple days where events occur and is more focused on creating a sort of compelling, active story, it's important for players sometimes to hit certain beats, to find certain things. So New York Noir ensures that the players not have seen everything, but have seen the most critical things. And the way it does that is that on each day of the case, the author can indicate that certain things, certain markers that are given to you when you visit a certain lead or certain documents are found before the day completes. And that requires a sort of a weird system with time, because if you let people take an infinite amount of time on a given day and they're adding time, they could get into 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. and cycle through the whole day. So there's this sort of little bit of artificial thing that happens with time. And it sets up this concept called overtime. But here's how it used to work. There used to be a whole set of instructions in the beginning about how overtime works. Here's overtime. If it passes beyond the day and you haven't found all the required markers, you go into overtime. And here's how you track time. And there's a method of playing if you don't like any of that stuff. But basically, when you got to the start of a day, you got these instructions that looked like this. It would say the following 2 items or however many items must be found before you end day 1. Make a note of this. Here they are, marker A and C. Then record that your current day starts at 10 and record that it ends at 3. So if you found these markers by 3, then your day ends. If you haven't found them, you enter overtime and you're stuck at 3 p.m. until you find these markers. Now that basic idea holds. And if you really got stuck and you didn't want to give up, you'd go and read some hints about those 2 markers. So the same basic idea of required markers and sort of overtime is still in place. But instead of giving this information up front at the start of the day, this sort of artificial weird information, remember this, remember what time your day ends, etc., the new system says this. It's a more generic event system. It says during the course of your play, you're going to be told about events that happen at certain times, and you should record that. And you would record that here. And so there may be generic events that some are mandatory, some are optional that you could go to if you wanted to, but they all take this form. It says record this event. It says it's mandatory. It tells you when at 3 p.m. and what lead to read when it triggers. So this would say at 3 p.m. day 1, you might get an event that's 3 days ahead of time, but all the required markers have the same flavor. They get given to you at the start of the day. So before you start playing, you would record in your log that at 3 p.m. you should visit this lead 1-7965 on page 23. And yes, it's required. So the player would play, and when they got to 3 p.m., their schedule on their log would tell them to go to this lead. Now, when they go to that lead, I'm going to click it here, they get a little lead that looks like this. It says, it tells you where you came from, and it says, okay, it's now 3 p.m. on Thursday, June 10th. Day 1's ending. Now we're going to tell you, here are these 2 items. You don't get told ahead of time. You just do your normal detectiving, but when you get to this 3 p.m. event, now it says, okay, your day's wrapping up. These markers must be found before you can end the day. And now it gives you a little reward. If you were a good detective and you managed to track these things that you should have been finding, then you get a little reward. You get 1 reputation little bonus for each marker you found, and an extra bonus if you found them all. If you haven't found them all yet, then you're in overtime. It's 3 p.m. Go back out there searching for them. As soon as you have found them, then you're concluding your day by going to the evening lead, which I'll click on, which is here. Okay, so that's the system. It's now we have a more generic event system. Sometimes the events are required, sometimes they're optional. And now you're not front loaded with all this information about required markers and what to do. You're just told, trigger this event. And when you get to that event, most days will look like that. It'll say, here's your required markers. If you found them, you get this bonus. But other things could be done at that event. And if an author wanted to have something terrible happen or some choice that gets made at the end of the day, it would all be handled there. And it also handles a problem where people were confused about how to segue to the next day and when their day ends and when they should do that. And now I think we have a nice, much cleaner, elegant, generic system of events that will keep people from getting lost and keep the cognitive load down. So I'm thrilled with this new event system. And that's that. Any other comments to talk about before I move on to some more mechanics here? Stuart says, different writers have different strategies. Some like to plan a plot in detail. Others like to rough draft. And Rob uses the term that many writers talk about, plotters versus pantsers. I'm going to talk about my favorite books shortly that talk about this stuff. Okay, so let me just show you a couple more mechanical things. New duration. So I think I can show it on the same thing here. In the old case, in the old format, a lot of the leads This is the tutorial I'm showing. So in the old case, all the leads tell you time advanced 60 minutes. You can see that little box, There are a couple problems with that. First is it's taking up a lot of space. And the second thing is sometimes it would be oddly positioned, like you'd have a choice somewhere and it wasn't clear if it was telling you to advance time, even if you made the choice or not. It was a little more prone to error. The new version shows the lead time at the top of all leads that take time. So you can see, I'm showing you the demo case, that's why I'm not worrying about spoilers, but you can see here, this is now what it looks like. When you look at a lead, you've got the location, which is now a little smaller, so you don't read it by accident, and it tells you how much time passes. Depending on the case, there'll be a default time for each lead. In this case, in the demo, it's 60 minutes. So whenever a lead takes 60 minutes, it's just shown like this. Occasionally, there'll be a lead that takes a different amount of time, and you'll see that'll be highlighted in red, so it's a little harder to miss. So that's it. Just a little simple change to not waste so much space. You can see the hints some things don't take time like the hints. Remember that this time passing is not a hugely critical part of New York Noir. It's important for it, but if you forgot to take time somewhere here, nothing's going to break. The rules tell you that. So don't get overly obsessed about worrying about if you missed marking a time. Okay, so I talked about those things. I talked about canvassing blocks already. Fingerprints I showed you the fingerprint directory, and I've talked about that in the past. If you play Foxtrot East, you will see use of fingerprints. It's not clear how fingerprints have been used before in a couple of games, most notably Gumshoe, where they played a large role. Some people really loved it. It's a weird mechanic though, because it's sort of like searching for a needle in a haystack. There is some cool mechanics where to find a fingerprint, you classify it first into one of these types. So there's a whole discussion here in the fingerprint directory about how to search for fingerprints, how to think about it, what you could figure out, how to identify fingerprints, etc. So there's some strategy, like if you've got a very uncommon fingerprint group, then that would be, or a scar, that would be the way you would search for it. Then you could find that person's full set. And there's some clever things about it, but not everyone is going to enjoy it. One of the philosophies of New York Noir is to incorporate a hint system thematically, narratively into the game. So what you'll see when you play Foxtrot East is you'll come across fingerprints in the game. And some of the advanced players, or if you enjoy that kind of visual thing, will want to take a break and try to find that fingerprint. And if you find that fingerprint, then you can look up and get the fingerprint records of this person. If you got stuck, if you didn't enjoy that process, you could go to the fingerprint hint section in the case and look up that fingerprint in the hints, so you don't have to spend the time searching for it here. The only cost is you'll get a couple demerits, which would affect your score in a small way. And to me, that is the best. I do think you don't want to try to please everyone, but for me, this is exactly what I want in this kind of game. It captures the sort of procedural element of being a detective. If you enjoy that stuff and want to stretch your game out a little bit and really have fun, you've got that. If it's slowing down your enjoyment of the game, then just go talk to your advisor in the game to have him look up the fingerprint for you, and you can skip that part of the game at no cost to your enjoyment. You just got to swallow your pride a little and take a couple demerits. In addition to using the hints, though, for the fingerprint, there is a new system that I call IRPs. And this was another thing that was inspired by John Keene's Razorhurst. John Keene's Razorhurst has a sort of hint system where you can ask an informant about 3 things each day. And so we've got a kind of version of that here. Let me see, is it on my next slide? IRPs. Okay, not used in the cases before Foxtrot East, but now used in Foxtrot East. And you can see there's a little track here for you to keep track of them. The way it works in Foxtrot East is at the end of each day, you're given some IRPs, some investigative resource points. So you get 3 on the first day, and then you've got a choice of like 10 things you could request research on. So I don't want to give away any spoilers, but basically you could do background checks on people that you've met that are involved in your case. You could search for fingerprints. You could do blood analysis tests, whatever. They all take a certain amount of time. So typically they'd be ready on the next day, and they may cost different number of points. Each day you'll get a couple more, and each day you may have more actions that you could perform based on new people you met, new evidence you discovered. So by the time you go through your 5 days, you could save up your IRP points to use later, or you could use them all as you go. You're told in the beginning that any you don't spend will improve your score. So I suspect some players will be using those to... Some players will be saving them and saying, I don't need this, I'll do my own research. Some players will be using some of them. Some of the things, there's the only way to get that information is by spending IRP points, but the game's not going to break if you don't do them, but it gives you some tough choices to make every day. What extra information, what thread do you want to pull and ask people to do research for you between days, and do you want to schedule? Some things are very expensive, some things are cheap. You'll have some tough decisions to make. In addition to the sort of moral, psychological choices that you get given while you play a New York Noir game that are more like choose your own adventures, this is a little bit like allocating resources. I'm curious to see what people think of it and how people use that resource. But I can't tell you much more about it because I don't want to spoil the choices you make in Foxtrot East. Okay, I think we're reaching the end here of this section. I want to talk about context now. At the last design diary, I talked about this being a gap in New York Noir, a missing element. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective has a list of 10 allies, 10 people that you could talk to during the game, and they're shown on the back of the Space Cowboys list. And there's a whole couple pages in the original game telling you about each one. And in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, they serve these 10 people serve multiple roles. The first role is sort of a narrative role of being friendly faces that are recurring characters, and they're actually quite enjoyable to go visit because over the course of a dozen cases or so, you get to know their personalities. It becomes kind of fun to go visit them. It becomes a place to go when you don't know where else to go. It's sort of like a break, a little rest to recover your thoughts. Let's just go visit this guy and talk to him. We don't know where else to go. Maybe this person will have some information for us. And each of the people are specialized in a certain area. But there's also a problem with the way Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective has these allies, this list of 10 informants and allies. For example, one of them is the Central Cab Depot, and one of them is birth and death records. The problem is that if you treat these people like, I'm always going to visit these 10 people just for fun, what happens is you go to the cab depot to talk to your guy, or you go to Lestrade just to talk to him, and he's like, here's this critical clue for your case that breaks the case wide open. And you're like, wow, I didn't even get to the point where I thought we needed cab records, and here I am being given this key clue. So when we play, we tend to not go to them till the very end, because we don't want... It's not just that they give you key clues, it's that the other way that they're used in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective is that they're used as a hint system. There's no built-in hint system into Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, but it's not uncommon for authors to use these 10 allies as sort of hints. So we have to avoid, when we play, we don't go to them till we're done figuring out the case on our own, because we don't want to get hints. So originally my idea was, don't use this ally system in New York Noir. If a case has a specific place it wants you to go for information, it'll add it to the case. But it was clear to me that that was creating a hole, an emotional hole in the game. One wants to have people, recurring characters, friends to visit in every case. And it's good to have something that you can take a break when you're lost, when you're not sure, when you just want a change of pace, to go visit your friends. So what we've done in New York Noir is split that functionality off into two parts. So different authors may have different main protagonists, different detectives with different contacts, but I have created a first set of 10, I call them contacts, but you could think of them as allies, for my campaign. And here they are. You've got the chief of police at the financial crimes where you used to work. You've got the medical examiner. You've got a guy who's familiar with sort of spycraft and stuff. You've got county clerk of governmental records. It's not far mapping from Sherlock Holmes allies. They all have their own specialty. You've got the library person, you've got the newspaper person, you've got the underworld person, you've got your sister, Penny, you've got Jewel, who's your secretary. And so I'm just starting to fill out details about them. They all have a location and a lead. So this is, so far, would be very familiar to you from a Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective ally list. But part of the big difference here is the expected use for them. So in New York Noir cases, you would expect the player to visit their friends. And you would expect these contacts not to be giving hints and not to be doing the research for you. In Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, if you go to your ally who's in charge of birth and death records, you're going there to talk to them, but you're going there to look up any birth and death records. If there's any birth and death records involved in your case in any way, you're going to get them when you visit that ally. That is not how it's intended to work in New York Noir. In New York Noir, we're going to expect players to visit their contacts. And the contact list is provided at the beginning of the case. So if you write a different case and you create your own detective, she might have her own contacts, but the player is expected to go to these. So if you want an important part of your case to be given to you in one of these places, that's fine. But note that even though these contacts have an area of specialty, none of them represent you conducting that research there. It's just talking to that person. And let me explain more exactly what I mean by that. In New York Noir, you are given this research guide. This is how it looked before. There were no contexts. There was just this research guide, a much more fine-grained list of places that you might go do research. So here are all these different areas of the public library you might go if you want taxi information, but there's also every local taxi company. New York Noir in general tries to be much more fine-grained so you don't accidentally get information. You have to be clever about where you're going if you want to learn something. So if you wanted to look up records on firearms permits, if you wanted to look up fire investigations of arson, civil court records, marriage and divorce, birth and death certificates, prison records, parole records, building permits, property records, driver's license records, parking tickets, etc. So in your case, you're going to have to be much more clever about where to go to gain information. You're not going to stumble on it. It's not going to be like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective where you say, well, let's just go to the guy who manages all government records. Maybe it's relevant for my case. You're going to have to know what information you want. You're not going to stumble on anything. But the new change is to say, okay, we're going to divide up. I've divided up this suggested research. These are just suggested places, not exclusive. I've divided this up into new sections, more modular sections. So now you've got sections for outside agencies, court criminal justice records, other government records. Here's library, here's transportation, travel, and communication, and here's newspaper context. These are all the research locations have now been broken up into 10 or so categories. And each of these categories matches an area of expertise of one of your allies. So the idea is now, as an author, you can expect every player to go during the course of the case to visit all their friends. And if you wanted to give them a little bit of a hint or a big hint, however much you wanted, to do a certain specific research, you could put it in that context specialty. So if you wanted the player in a certain case, for example, to search for some rare manuscript, because that's relevant to the case, you could expect that the public library area is covered by Emiliana Alessica, who's your friend at the library. So you're expected to visit her. She might or might not, depending on how difficult you want to make the case, give you a nudge to go to a specific department. In addition, because this list is sort of overwhelming, there's a new system when you visit these people. Remember, you're meant to visit these people just for fun, to talk to them. Here's an example of what you would see when you visit Emiliana at the library. This is your contact at the library. And the part to note here is, here's the entry when you visit her. She's talking to you. And then here's a little reminder of the research locations at the library. So that list, when you go to the library, is this list. And each of your contacts that you visit is going to have a little dialogue with them. Then if the author wanted to give you a nudge to a specific place or a conversation you might have with them about your case, and then they're going to give you that chunk of items of research locations in their lead. So this information is broken up and scattered or you could say, so that it's less overwhelming in each of these contact locations. So my thought is that we've got the best of both worlds now. We've got your friends, that you got this narrative satisfaction of visiting, as much clue as you want to give about specific, or as little about specific locations, and it makes this much less overwhelming. If you look at this at the start of your case, you're like, oh my God, there's so many places I can go. But if you're playing now and you're like, look, I think I need to go to the library to research something, then you're going to hit this page where you get this narrative and a reminder, oh, here are the places at the library I can go. I could go to general reference, fiction, culture, etc. So each of these little areas of research are now broken up to not be so overwhelming. The last piece of the contacts is that those of you who have seen me play Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective on the channel know that I'm in love with these cards that a BGG user, Eric, made. And you can see he's made cards for each of the allies in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. And it basically is like a business card. It tells you their location, and at the back, it tells you a little bit about what their specialty is. And Eric has been so kind as to start working on business cards for New York Noir. So the intent is, with the final production version, that you will have a stack of business cards like this for all your contacts that you are going to be visiting in each case. And they'll look like this with some information on the back and so on. And you can see there's Penelope, our sister, the traveling musician, and there you have it. So there'll be a physical set of cards you could lay out to help you think about who do you want to visit when. Makes it that much more enjoyable to go have a little narrative dialogue with one of your friends. And Eric is just so good at these. They feel so period. Okay, so there's that. Let's move along now. Okay, handbook to writing cases. I already went over that with you. Okay, we're just wrapping up here. I want to make some book recommendations, though. I'm going to give you my 3 or 4 favorite books on writing. These are my 3 favorite books currently on writing mystery. These are books for people writing novels, but very useful for writing cases. And I want to show you those books here. So here are my 2 main ones that I've been recommending and recommended to Martinez, and Martinez can vouch for how good these are. Both of these books are sort of high-level science of storytelling, and there's some very clever stuff here about, well, patterns that show up in storytelling across cultures that are so resonant. There's a whole series of books about that kind of stuff. But, things like the use of a mentor and a villain and having flaws in characters and stuff and what makes a good scene. But these are sort of high-level, very deep, philosophically important books, especially this one here. And there's some really nice stuff here about, for example, stuff that may not occur to you about what makes a character compelling, and discussion of things like sacred flaws and how people will like your character even if they're an unlikable person. They'll be interested in if they're good at something, or if they've got some broken worldview, and some very deep ideas about how you get a tragic story when you've got a person with a broken worldview that can't adapt it, and how you get a very satisfying story if you've got someone with a broken worldview and they reach a point where they have to change. Cannot recommend these two books more highly. Been very influential for me in writing. The new book that I want to recommend every bit as much is a very different book by Hallie Ephron. Writing and selling your mystery novel. Ignore this whole part about selling. There's really very little in here that have to do with any about that. This is really a book on writing. This is the revised edition. But you would be mistaken reading this book and not thinking it was a book about how to write cases for something like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. It is broken down into details about scenes and clues and naming characters in very minute detail that feels like it's telling you how to write a case. And it's so useful, it's so good, and so much like it's giving you advice on how to write cases. Now, it's structured in sort of a workbook. I tend not to use this workbook, but if you like that kind of stuff, like being told, here's an assignment, do this, then even more so. But there's this is very concrete suggestions here. Very concrete suggestions, like a whole comment about introducing characters and not overloading them with names. Very useful, like very concrete suggestions about, like bullet pointed things about not using similar names, give characters different first letter names. I mean, just very specific stuff. But as an example of one thing in this book, that I've read a dozen writing books, and it's shocking how most of them are covering the same territory. Then occasionally one person will either focus on something differently or say something that you haven't read before. And one of the things in this book that was so shocking to me, such an epiphany, is these other books talk about the importance of a villain. And you don't need to convince me that a villain is important. For me, the movies are mostly about the villains. But Hallie Ephron talks about the concept of an adversary. Where does she talk about an adversary? Does anyone want to guess what an adversary is? It's not a villain. I don't know why there's no special chapter on it, because it deserves one. Okay, does anyone want to guess what an adversary is? How an adversary is different from a villain? Any guesses? Because this was a little bit of an epiphany to me. It's clear you need a good villain in any case. But why do you need why is an adversary so valuable, and what is an adversary? I'll give you a hint if you're a Sherlock Holmes person. Stewart says, someone trying to gain the same objective as you. No. We would call that a rival. And there's some interesting discussions about how a rival makes for an interesting story, like a contest. But adversary, Hallie Ephron has something different in mind. Yes, I think Melissa, but Debbie has it closer to the mark. It's someone working at cross purposes with you. So another way to look at it is that most of these books talk about the narrative drive of conflict. Conflict makes compelling reading. And the adversary is someone getting in your way. And she uses a couple examples, like Sherlock Holmes, Lestrade might be your adversary, but the more classic case, if you're talking about police and detective, is sort of the boss that's holding you back, that's saying, no, you can't do that. No, you're acting out of line. No, you have to work within the limits that I'm giving you. You can't break the rules. It's someone creating conflict that the protagonist is up against. It might even be someone nominally on the same side as you. But it's someone who's creating this friction, this conflict, that your character is being held back. And a little light bulb went off in my mind when I read that. And if you play Foxtrot East, you will see. After I read this, I went back in Foxtrot East. I made some changes. And it's a game changer, this concept of an adversary creating friction. It's not just that they create this dramatic conflict. It's that it gives you all this opportunity to have dialogue and discussion that reveals the personality and thinking of your main character. It's especially important for New York Noir, which is told in first person. You're mainly in one person's head. So the idea of having this foil that is creating these conflicts with the main character in addition to the villain really opens things up. So there you have it, my 3 recommendations for books. If you are interested in writing cases for New York Noir or in general mystery, there are my recommendations. I do have another one here, which is sort of a 4th place, Larry Beinhardt, more like this, about specifics. And if you want a 4th book, then you could hit this one too. But there you have it. And this is a good time to remind you, there is a Discord channel for Co-op for Two with a big section about New York Noir. I love to talk about these kinds of issues. If you're interested in writing a case or playtesting these cases or just talking about New York Noir, please do stop by the Discord. There's a Board Game Geek page for it as well, but the Discord where we have our active discussions. If you're curious about writing a case, just give it a try. If you do write a case, I will play it live on the channel. All right, let me see if there's anything else. Because I have 2 controls, sorry. Okay, couple other things. I will be in Gen Con at the end of July. That's a convention, the biggest board game convention in the US. In Indianapolis, I have set up 2 play sessions for New York Noir. They are currently filled somehow, but I'll be there with the game. If you want to meet, talk, discuss, let me know. Or if you're just a fan of the channel, let me know. I'll bring you a cup, a little Co-op for Two mug of some sort. I will also be at the local convention here in Savoy, Illinois, right next to Champaign, called Tabletop Central in September. I'll be there doing nothing but sitting there with New York Noir at a table. So I'm happy to, if you're in the area and want to come and talk and chat or play the game, that would be the place to do it. As I said, I'd love to have more people involved in New York Noir. We are going to have it produced. I think we're looking at a year from now. Plenty of time. And then, of course, you can write cases after it gets produced, but there's an advantage to working on stuff now. You can help us shape the direction of the game. Happy to have volunteers of any sort. If you're interested in getting involved, there's something for you to do. One of the things you could do is explore the idea of a New York Noir tabletop role-playing game. I have an idea for playing cases by having someone run the case. It's a very minimal role-playing game, but if this is your kind of thing, I'd be very interested in having someone try this out. It's not really my thing. I don't really have a group for it. But if you have a group that might like to solve a mystery, you would read the case, learn it, and then run it. Let players say, this is where we want to go, and then you would improvise the dialogue. There's a whole thread on BGG about this and a document for you to check out if you're a role-playing game kind of person. And then this is just summarizing what I said before. There is a page for New York Noir on Board Game Geek. If you would visit that page and click the little heart, that makes you a fan of the game, so it would be easier for you to get updates. You could subscribe to this page, and then you'd get updates anytime a new forum post is made. That might be a little overkill for you, but I would love it if you would heart that game so that I could reach out to you when there's some big announcement about the game, so you can get notified when it actually does get produced. There are threads there about the different cases and downloads, etc. You can also contact me by email. There is a Patreon for this channel. That's what pays for all of the games I play on this channel. I have no relationship with any publishers. There are no ads on this channel. Everything is non-monetized and turned off. If you do like this project and you want to help support it, you could become a member of the Patreon. And then, of course, you could download and play the demo case and check it out yourself. And I think that's it. Last slide is just a reminder about the demo case. All right, so that's it. It looks like we went 2 hours and 10 minutes. That's in ballpark range. Let me check in with the chat. I'm happy to sit here and talk for as long as people want, if they've got questions, ideas, anything like that. So there's a whole bunch of other documents as I work on various things, little essays and stuff. One of them discusses alternate settings and context ideas. So if you are interested, if you're interested in the main protagonist I've written and have context for, I'm happy for you to write cases involving that person. But maybe you're a little bit more ambitious. You want to create your own detective in your own world. There's a page of some suggested settings. There's some interesting ones. I'd love to see some from a different perspective. A female detective or PI, maybe a black detective in New York City in 1920s, 30s. That'd be a totally different experience. But there's a whole list of ideas. One is like a cozy group of team of people. There's one called Old Man Holmes, with the idea of tying into Sherlock Holmes. I'd love to see people write some supernatural cases set in this world. Debbie says, I'm with Martinez thinking that we should seriously consider a live group playthrough of Foxtrot East. I mean, one of the really sad things about this game is that I can't, I don't know, maybe it doesn't sound right, but I want to play a long 8-hour game. So it's not fun. It's a big chunk of the joy of writing this case I can't experience because I can't play it. But I could try to facilitate a case on the channel, but maybe we would try with the demo case first. But the problem is really that if I know the solutions, I obviously can't be involved in the discussions. And the problem is that because of the delay in YouTube, it's really hard to have a conversation. But you could imagine having a Zoom conversation where a bunch of people could discuss it live, or we could figure out some way. I'm open to the idea of trying some experiment. This whole project is about experimenting with stuff. So we could try an experiment. Any other thoughts? It might be interesting to watch how people react to your own case in real time. Oh, it absolutely would. I would be very interested in seeing a group play through these cases. I just don't know if my YouTube, if having a live stream on this channel would let me do that because of the problem interacting. But I'd be very interested in another channel playing through one of these cases live. Especially someone who's got some experience with Sherlock Holmes consulting detective. But yeah, you have a good point. It might be better to find another channel that could play a case live. The problem is it's prohibitive to get them a physical copy of most of this stuff. Zoom or Discord to host live play would be great. Yes, I do think you might have a point though. Maybe what I should do is try to find another YouTube channel that plays cases with their audience and get them a copy. And then you guys could play it with them and I could just observe. That's not a bad idea. Any other? I am very curious what Foxtrot East is going to be, or fly someone out to take over the studio. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I mean, if it was just for a couple hours, that would be one thing. I just feel like that 8-hour case would take me 24 hours to play on the channel over a course of, 5 sessions. So that's tricky. I'm going to sit here for a while in silence to see if anyone has any questions. Feel free to leave the stream at any time. I just want to do that thing where normally I end these fairly quickly. I think it's like when you ask the class if they have any questions, you have to wait around in silence for 10 minutes before people get up the nerve to ask their questions. We could discuss it more in the Discord. Yes, we'll discuss this issue more in the Discord. The other thing would be to sort of say, to have a scheduled playthrough where everyone played the game. Like we could decide, okay, everyone who wants to, we're going to play this case offline, but on this day, on this date, at this time. And then while everyone's playing, they could talk in the Discord and share thoughts and ideas, and I could be available to give help if you get stuck. Any other questions, ideas, book recommendations? Does anyone in the chat feel like they're ready to start, that they're interested in running a case? Stuart Warner has play tested a couple cases, is a Patreon supporter, by the way. Thank you. Has written some mystery stories and is considering writing a story for New York Noir, writing a case. Anna, who joins us for a lot of playthroughs, has written 3 cases. that just need a little tweaking. Jonathan Warner has been working on a case. Goggalore, who's Peter, the person who's made the online tool, says, I started writing a case, have a draft, realized how much of a commitment it is to flesh it out to a full case. It is a lot of work, but the pain seems to me to mostly come from the first draft. Once you have most of your scenes just sketched out, it becomes a lot easier to just go in and just be like, okay, let me tweak up this scene, let me tweak up this scene. I haven't shown recently the plot maps that my tool can create that are very fun to look at, where you can see what clues led to what. But it is a commitment. It absolutely is. I think I looked at how long it took me to write my last case. I think it was about a month. Took about a month or a month and a half. Obviously not working on it full time at all, but you need the time also to sleep on it, come up with ideas, fine tune it. You can't just write it all in one day. Sandy, are you saying September you're thinking of writing a case, or you want to play a case in September? I didn't show Logan's progress with the maps. Do I have it somewhere? Let me see. Logan, yeah, look at how close Logan is to having art for buildings in the entire area. Look at this, hundreds of buildings he has done research on to find out where they are, what they look like, and then sketched them out. And here's his coverage so far of Manhattan. So eventually you can see that there'll be these buildings all over the map of places you can go. And when you visit one of these places in a case, there'll be a nice larger image of that case, of that building. We'll have some nice boats in the harbor. And then the other piece of art is that all of the parks are going to get custom art. All of the parks, the green areas, there should be more of them. But we'll have little custom art for each of the parks that looks more like, the art that Adam did for Hell's Kitchen. I expect we'll have a whole bunch of this style parks throughout the world. 30 or so little parks that are sort of schematic. So you could say, oh, I imagine the guy ran this way, darted through here. What are some good noir novels? The writer that gets recommended the most as a classic noir writer and gets referenced quite frequently in these books is Raymond Chandler. Stuart says, do you write in Word or Scrivener, then copy and paste into New York Noir when it's complete, or did you work on the drafts in New York Noir? That's a great question. That is a great question. Let me tell you exactly what I do, because I do think it's what I would recommend. New York Noir, the back-end web tools that build cases. For example, let's go to the demo case here. Past is a crooked game. If you click edit, you can see almost everything except for a detail about the preferred format. Almost everything about the case is in this source code, which is all of the text of the case, of all the leads and all the hints. And the beginning has a whole bunch of configuration about how to lay it out and stuff. You could edit a case here, but you shouldn't. You shouldn't. And Stuart was asking, what should you use to write your case? The intention of this casebook language, this markup language, which is based on Markdown is to allow you to write it as plain text. And what I do and what I recommend is to use something like Google Docs. And if we look at my case, here it is. Here is my Google Doc for this case. Now, the reason I recommend using, so you can see, here is the day one intro. And you can see here's a section, here's the subsection, here's what generates that quote, and here's the thing that says what day it is, and here's the text. And this uses Markdown to do bolding and underlining and stuff. So this is the casebook code markup that generates what you saw here. Here. Sorry, I gotta switch here. That source code generates that PDF. And my tool is what generates the nice table of contents and all the links and does a ton of things that will make it easier to write your case. But that's just my long-winded way of saying that you don't want to use a word processor where you're going to be controlling the visual layout of it, because you want to be working with plain text. And the advantage of Google Docs is that it's designed for collaborative editing. And that's what makes it possible for me to give Debbie permission to go and edit my document. We've got a bunch of people who are willing to help with editing. Debbie Levy has been the linchpin, the essential editor who's been editing all of our cases. But so that is my suggestion, to use a plain text editor. Use whatever you want to write your first draft. But when you're really going to start making revisions, use something like Google Docs. It's very convenient. It's very minimalistic. And you can have a collaborative editor come on there and edit simultaneously with you, or leave notes or make suggested edits. And then when you want to build it to a PDF, that's when you just copy and paste into the website, into the New York Noir tool. Peter says, it'd be cool if New York Noir web interface could integrate with Google Docs. Yes, it would. That would be a nice feature to have, something that automatically synced up and just loaded whatever your most recent edits are into the build page. I agree. The only time it's occasionally useful for that built-in editor is occasionally my tools will throw an error and say on this line, and Google Docs is not good about numbering lines because it doesn't have a concept of wrapping lines and not giving them each its own number. So occasionally having the built-in editor is useful. But how do we access Peter's tool? Someone was asking about it earlier. Well, if you just come in the Discord, Peter will give you the URL to his tool. I'm not sure how much he wants to, which exact URLs he wants to share. Raymond Chandler for The Big Sleep, and Dashiell Hammett is another famous noir author. And of course, all of the movies, the noir movies that are so good, like The Big Sleep, Maltese Falcon, Rebecca, classics. I mean, one of the interesting comments was made about playing New York Noir felt a little bit more like watching a movie, whereas Sherlock Holmes consulting detective felt a little bit more like reading a book. I think that might have to do with a bit of the way I write my cases. I'm not really a visual person, so it feels more like writing. So, but the noir The noir movies are a good way to get the patter of the language down. The other reason to come into the Discord is to plead with Peter to listen to me and make the all-in-one search page. I am just dying for that. If I could only convince him. It's amazing how much work he's done and how good that is. Just a little bit more and it's perfection. Debbie says, I'll need a map for my own case at some point. It's a fictional city, which makes things harder. So yeah, I mean, we should separate. There's New York Noir, the world, that my cases are set in Manhattan. And then there are the tools, and both Peter's tools and my casebook tools are more agnostic about the world. And so you could use my tools to make Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective games, cases, and Bureau of Investigation. Mythos Tales, in a previous design diary, I talked about settings that let you do that. And Peter's tools, you can see he's already added maps for Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. He could add maps for other cases. Peter says, my wife just shouted in the background, tell him no. I like spending time. Well, Peter's a little bit like me, although he seems a little bit wiser about his time. There's like a part of the brain for a lot of us programmers that's just, it's its own, it decides what it wants to work on. And you can't really affect it much. All you can do is sort of, maybe you plant a seed. One day the person wakes up. One day you wake up and your brain says, you're going to spend the next month building an espresso scale. Why? You don't know. Your brain has just decided that's what it wants to work on. The best you can do is sort of head it off at the past before it gets going. Once it's get going on a project, you're sort of stuck with it. So that's how this whole New York Noir started 3 years ago. I tried to resist it. We talked about it a little bit. Eventually, it's a little parasitic idea gets in your brain. And the only cure for it is to write the code and implement it. That's called ADHD. I don't know if that really is ADHD. I don't know what it is, though. What we haven't talked about is really, for me, the holy grail of this project is the play-by-mail, because that's one of my favorite modes of playing these games. There's so little of it out there now. And we're going to get there. The tools here are all being built so that they will support play-by-mail. But so eventually in a year, we'll be talking about cases that you can play and get letters in the mail once a week. Perry says, I'm slowly working on a supernatural mystery for New York Noir, off to a very slow start. Well, it is like pulling teeth starting a case. I have found that the first draft is really the painful part. That's why part of why I wrote that guide to writing cases is to sort of get you over that hump. Just write a very bad, I think a good lesson in life for whatever you're doing, writing anything. Just get that bad first draft onto paper. Then you can visualize it. Then you can see what you're working with. It becomes so much easier to improve it. And a big chunk of getting writer's block and not being able to finish is your brain being like, you write a sentence, you're like, that's no good. How do I fix that sentence? And if you allow yourself to get stuck on there, nothing ever gets put on the page. the real trick to producing creative stuff really seems like just letting yourself write. Letting yourself write. Don't self-censor. Let yourself write a bad first draft. Then you can come back and fix it. The 10-Minute Author is a good book for just getting on and writing. Okay, that's an interesting recommendation. I will check that out. It's odd. Sometimes you have to read 4 books that are all saying the same thing, and then either one writes in a certain way that clicks and resonates with you, or just by the 4th book, your brain is processing it differently. If you do end up getting these books and reading them, let me know if you agree with me that these are amazing books. I think Haley Efron could repackage this book as sort of how to write cases, how to write mystery detective game cases. But I'm trying to take the lessons from here and put it into my guide. So hopefully by the time my guide is done, it'll have the best stuff that I've picked up here. Mitchner wrote every morning. Some writers have a schedule. They write every morning no matter what. Some, as they call them, some people plot everything out ahead of time. The best thing about if you people write cases is I can play it live on the channel, and you can enjoy watching someone play your case. Maybe the AI is obviously getting good enough to be able to write cases soon. It's not quite there yet, but the other thing, there's a bunch of stuff that the AI is going to be doing eventually. But one thing it might be fun to watch an AI try to play a case. But I think the other area where we're going to see AI creep into New York Noir at some point is audio. And you've seen the video is getting very good. So it wouldn't be surprising in a year from now if you couldn't watch the scenes acted out like a noir movie. Certainly, right now, even, you could have the scenes narrated to you by AI. So one of the ideas we had for New York Noir, similar in vein to a play-by-mail case, the part of the enjoyment of the play-by-mail case is it forces you to play slowly, right? You submit your moves. A week later, you get a letter back saying, I went here, this happened, I went here, did that. So that's going to be available for New York Noir soon. And authors will be able to write those cases the same way they write cases here. But the other idea I had was a bespoke radio play, weekly radio play that would work like this. You'd read the introduction to the case, and just like a play-by-mail, you'd submit some moves online, right? So you'd read the introduction, you'd say, okay, I want to go here, I want to go here, I want to go here. And you can watch my previous live streams about some ideas for having a priority queue. But in this version, what I'm imagining, and this will happen eventually, is that you'd put in your moves, and then a few days later, you'd get your 15-minute episode of your radio drama, which would be the audio recording, the audio radio drama of the moves that you chose. So if you chose to go down to the bakery and then go talk to your ally, your contact at the medical examiner, and then go see if the subway attendant heard anything, you would send those moves in, and then you'd get back your 15-minute radio drama watching those scenes that you've chosen, listening to those scenes that you've chosen as your moves. Or eventually, if the AI gets good enough, you'd be watching those scenes of the movie. So I don't see any reason why we won't be supporting that in a year. Agatha Christie was prolific, and her novels are great examples of well-structured mysteries. That's absolutely true. In fact, Rob, who's here, found a very interesting book. Rob, can you put the name of that book you found that is like a analysis of Agatha Christie's mysteries and structurally how she did them? There are a couple other books. Agatha Christie was part of the whole renaissance of fair play mysteries, and there was a whole group of writers that had an umbrella organization called the Detective Club, I think. And there are a couple of books collecting very short essays about writing from that group of people. Those books are worthwhile getting. I have them somewhere here. In fact, let me see if I can go grab them. I can grab Rob's book too. Well, here's a couple of them. Here's the Agatha Christie book that Rob recommended. It's not by Agatha Christie, it's an analysis of Agatha Christie mysteries and how they work. I haven't read that one yet. And then here we have a collection of essays, short essays by some of the masters, including Agatha Christie. And there's another one as well, I forget what it's called. And here's by a more recent group of mystery writers. Again, small essays by masters in the field. They're just not, there's an occasional useful essay, but they're surprisingly hit or miss, and mostly miss. Even the Agatha Christie article, for example. And it just goes to show you, just because you're good at writing fiction, writing mysteries, doesn't mean you're good at communicating that knowledge to others. That's why these, to me, Haley Ephron did write a bunch of fiction as well, but those collections are still worthwhile reading. They're just much more hit and miss. Nelson says, the one issue about Agatha Christie mysteries is she makes a huge effort to create a surprising conclusion that makes it difficult to solve. It's certainly true that writing a good mystery fiction story is not the same as writing a good mystery case. It's absolutely true. They differ. That may be a good segue point. They differ largely in terms of the ending, how they end. And they differ in terms of the element of having an active protagonist. Whereas if you're writing a mystery case, the players can go anywhere, and you have to structure the actions they take differently, and you have to make the end a mystery. But all of those things are discussed in my little handbook. I do think there are unique elements to writing a case, and unique elements to writing a case as we've envisioned in New York Noir, especially in terms of epilogues and days broken, events happening between days, and structuring cases in terms of days. So it is a little bit of a leap. It's much more of a structural, mechanical thing to make a working case. Whereas if you're writing a story, you've got complete control over everything. But sometimes having those constraints is helpful. Where's my coffee? Other thoughts, ideas, questions, suggestions? The way I envision things is that in a year, we will be able to produce a full set of New York Noir that people could purchase from some manufacturer. I don't think there's any way to make a profit on any of this. I don't think it's a commercially viable project, and I don't think there's any real enjoyment to be had going down that route. So what I'm hoping, though, is that we can bring it to life enough that people continue to make cases for it. That would be the joy that I'm hoping to get out of it, to be able to play cases that other people write and get some enjoyment. So, but I'm hoping in a year we'll have enough produced that it will make sense for people to want to get their hands on it. A full campaign worth of cases and a whole bunch of fan-made cases and all the tools needed to build cases. And that by then I'll have made good progress on the play-by-mail stuff, which is where my heart is really at. And then we can start experimenting with other ideas like the audio and the other stuff. But Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective has survived since the 80s. That's what, 40 years? Boy, would it be nice to have to be able to create something that inspires people to write cases for decades to come. But let's focus on what we have control over. What we have control over is producing a good working world and tools to let people write cases and some good cases of our own that people can play and enjoy. And as a testbed for experimenting with ideas. One of the real pleasures of this project has been to take some of the insights we've had while playing these games and some of the ideas of how you could improve them and experimenting with those ideas. Okay, we're going to wrap up soon, but we still have some time for questions, ideas, recommendations. Yeah, I don't think Haley Efron's book is even available new. You'd have to buy this used. I buy most of the books I can used on Amazon. In fact, frequently on Amazon, there's a plugin called Camel. There are probably others where you can set price watches. Frequently, if a book comes out that's like $30, I'll just put a price watch on it used for like $10. And it might take a year or so, but eventually it comes out used for $10 and then I pick it up used. These two you could certainly get new on Amazon. This one I got on eBay. Haven't made my way through this one yet. what I've told everyone who's been volunteering their time on this project is that there's no profit to be made here. Everyone's sort of working on volunteer basis. But what we will try to do, we will find a place to get this produced. So those of you who want a physical set will be able to buy a physical set. And it's going to be expensive to produce. But what we can do is try to get a physical copy in the hands of those who have contributed significantly to the project. So those of you who have contributed to it will at least get a physical book, a little art piece. It's more of an art experiment. So if that's not good enough motivation, we can't do any better. But that's what we can offer. Okay, let's wrap it up. Thank you for joining me. For real, I'm going to click the right button to end the stream. I'll see some of you this week. We'll find something to play live. Next week, I'll probably do a channel update before we get back to our regular Sunday play-by-mail sessions. Yeah, let me know in the Discord what games you want to play this week, or on the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel. There's links to all of that on the YouTube channel. I'll see you all next time.